On today's show, let's be honest, this Bucs next season is being built in real time. The roster isn't finished, the plan isn't crystal clear, and every move from here forward feels like it could swing the entire next season. This isn't a team polishing the final touches. This is a team still deciding who it wants to be. Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. My name is Dan Holby. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find us online. It's bucsreport.com. And the best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe to the Bucs Report on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. So in this edition of the Bucs Report, we talk about the Buccaneers in this offseason as the moves that happen now will ultimately shape the next year's roster. It will shape what kind of team that it's ultimately going to be in the future. So let's dive into that here, talking about the moves that football is over. The Seattle Seahawks won the Super Bowl. Now it's time to make the real moves. So setting the zone and setting the tone in Tampa, and Zach Robinson is building this offense around Baker Mayfield's playmaking. And this is exactly what the Bucs need, that I believe that Baker Mayfield is the answer for the long term at the QB position for the Bucs. And it's interesting that it's a very fickle bunch, that the Buccaneers didn't get quite where they wanted to be last year. They missed the playoffs, and Carolina somehow beat them, and it's not really too surprising, right? But I think that it's quite clear that Baker Mayfield is the guy, and we can't forget that. The chance of MVP evaporated, and when the Buccaneers didn't perform as well as a lot of people had hoped, they kind of lost favor a little bit. But I still believe he is the guy. So welcome back into this episode of the Bucs Report, your home for everything at Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And we're diving straight into it today because the new offensive coordinator, Zach Robinson, is already telling us a lot about where this offense is headed. And Robinson comes in knowing Baker Mayfield. There is that continuity. There is that connection. And that is something that should be quantified, even though it's not easily quantifiable. And like I said, Robinson has that relationship with Baker. That's huge. And I think that relationship definitely could help the Buccaneers hit the ground running in game one of next season. And, they had that history, together in Los Angeles, and that matters. And I think it matters more than people want to admit. He's not walking in guessing who Baker is. He's not trying to get acquainted. He has seen the highlights in the notebook, the obsessive prep, the competitiveness, all of that. He believes Baker is a true igniter at the QB position. And here's why that biggest takeaway is true. Robinson, ultimately is not trying to box Baker in. And what do I mean when I say that? He's not trying to turn him into some pure pocket statue. He wants more bootlegs, more wiggles, more movement, more chance for Baker to use his legs and his instincts, because I think, just based on the fact that Baker got dinged up, that the easy thing to say is we got to keep him in the pocket. He needs to be Tom Brady 2.0, that just sit in the pocket. If a play doesn't develop, then just throw it at the sidelines, right? But that would be taking the intrinsic quarterback qualities out of Baker Mayfield, that he is the guy that if there is not a man open and he sees an opening, he is going to run with it. And ultimately, that is the right idea. But also different looks, like I said, bootlegs, these kind of things. So that tells you this is going to be a modern Bucs offense, one that leans into Baker's strengths instead of trying to coach them out of him, because that was one of my fears, to be honest with you, is that the new guy that comes in is going to try to take those things out of Baker. And, I talked about the early season heroics and how the Bucs had to battle back to win a lot of those games. And, in a lot of ways, like I've said, it's a coin toss. They could have gone either way. But, it was a lot of Baker's late game heroics is what put the Buccaneers into victory lane. But ultimately, what he wants from him is he wants him to be smarter, sure, but still aggressive, still hunting first down, still playing with that fire that makes him who he is. And this is a good sign for this team. All right, next, let's pivot to the ground game foundation. The biggest takeaway here is if the Bucs offensive line and Bucky Irving stay healthy, this run game can be next level elite. And shifting gears here a little bit, this is the Bucs Report, so a lot of ground to cover in about 30 minutes. Shifting gears to the trenches, because this whole offense still starts up front, no matter how fancy the play calling gets. And last season was a mess for the offensive line with injuries. Tristan Wirfs missed time. Luke Gadecki, Cody Mao went down for the year. Ben Bredesen ended up on the IR. And that kind of chaos makes it hard for any offense to find rhythm. But when this group is healthy, and, fingers and toes crossed, they will be. I know that sometimes guys get injured in the preseason, but that's not what we're counting on. Robinson basically said it himself. There are not many offensive lines you would rather have out there. That he wants to lean into the inside zone, use the athleticism of Wirfs, Gadecki, and Graham Barton, and really let these guys work downhill. And that leads to Bucky Irving, right? He is RB number one. Big picture, 30,000-foot view. Bucky is a star in the making, right? And over 1,000 rushing yards as a rookie, almost 400 receiving yards. And he showed real growth as a pass catcher. And Robinson, drinking the Kool-Aid, even compared him, how he uses him to Bijan Robinson in Atlanta. And that's not nothing. That means Bucky is not just the guy. He is a weapon. If he stays on the field, the backfield can be a problem for defenses in the run game and in the passing game as well. Talking about a player that needs to take a step forward, that we saw good things from him, but Emeka Egbuka. And the next step, biggest takeaway, Egbuka is about to become a centerpiece of this Bucs offense. Now let's talk about Egbuka here, because this is where things get really exciting for Bucs fans, because there is the question, Evans, Godwin, what is the future? His rookie year was good, not great, but you could see flashes, right? And those first 5 games, he looked like a potential star. 25 catches, 445 yards, 5 tutties. He was rookie of the year in the rookie of the year conversations. And then injuries happen, right? Chris Godwin, Mike Evans forced defensives to roll coverages his way, and you could see him hit the wall as a rookie a little bit. But here's the key. Zach Robinson clearly loves him. He studied him back at Ohio State. Went to his pro day, knows his special, his ball skills knows how versatile he is in the route tree. And even Mike Evans, if he comes back in 2026, Egbuka is going to have a bigger role. And year 2, ultimately is usually where receivers really take that leap. That what we saw from Egbuka last year was good. I think that what we're going to see from him next season is going to be next level. And Robinson sounds fully bought in on that happening in Tampa. So, yeah, the offense is not just Baker and Bucky. It is Egbuka's offense too right Now, next, let's pivot here. Talking about Bowles, right? And Bowles oftentimes gets a lot of grief. I give him a lot of grief, and he's the head coach, right? He is the guy that is going to get the grief if the team's not playing well. It's his ship. But he got some love here. Bowles, Gruden, and Jamel Dean. That's what we're going to position ourselves at here next. The Bucs are at a real crossroads with Todd Bowles and Jamel Dean this offseason. So last segment, and this is where things get a little more heated before the break. John Gruden went on the Rondé Barber show and basically called out Bucs fans for wanting to fire Todd Bowles. And Gruden, what did he say? His message was simple. Bowles is the coach. Everyone needs to get on the same page, and the team has to draft better, get edge rushers, and keep guys out of the training room. That tells you everything. Even Gruden knows this is a make or break offseason for Bowles. But why stick your head out for this guy, right? That's the big thing. If the defense does not take a step forward, if the pass rush doesn't improve, the hot seat is going to get that much hotter for Todd Bowles. And then, question marks galore. Then there is Jamel Dean. He just had one of the best seasons of his career, 3 picks, 9 pass breakups, a pick 6. And now a PFF is projecting him to get around $55 million over 3 years in free agency. That would make him one of the highest paid corners on the market. So what do we know about Jamel Dean? Jamel Dean is that he has a hard time staying healthy. Whether that's his fault or not, it is what it is. So the Bucs have a tough decision, right? Do they pay big money to keep a proven veteran, or do they lean into younger guys like Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Parrish? Either way, this offseason is going to shape the future of this franchise, and it's follow the bouncing ball, right? Where is this team going? Are they going to be competitors next season, or are they already on the outside looking in? All right, so coming up here after the break, the biggest takeaway, Tampa Bay may not be able to afford Mike Evans. What? Outrage! I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network. You can find us online, bucsreport.com. And the best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe to the Bucs Report on YouTube, like the videos, comment anything down below. Also, find us on the Bucs Minicast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. So let's talk about Mike Evans. And this is kind of a touchy one, right? I think that when you get the warm fuzzies talking about a wide receiver for the Buccaneers, I think that Mike Evans probably is one of the first ones that come to mind, right? Just a guy that's big in the community, a guy that is really good to the fans, a guy that is above and beyond. And the most important thing, really good on the field when he can stay healthy, right? As he has been prone to being injured here in the last few years or so. Let's talk about the man himself, Mike Evans, and the problem of being able to afford Mike Evans, because the biggest takeaway right out of the gate, Bucs fans, hold on to your seat and maybe cover your ears if you don't want to say it, as much as it hurts to say. The Bucs might not be able to afford Mike Evans if they want to build a real Super Bowl roster around him. And why? Because it's money, right? And also they need complementary pieces. And let me walk through why we're chopping it outside Raymond James, right? Mike Evans is a franchise icon, and nobody's going to take that from him. But football isn't a Hall of Fame ceremony. It's a salary cap sport. And you take a look at the other, questions, the other balls in the air, if you will, is Chris Godwin is already on a 3-year, $66 million deal. If Evans wants anywhere close to that, you're talking about roughly $45 million tied up in just 2 receivers. Now, does that make sense? That is a massive chunk of your cap. Now zoom out to the rest of the roster. The defense, and we'll get to this later, is below average. Edge rush is a glaring problem. Depth is shaky. You can't keep stacking money at the wide receiver while you pass rush looks like it's stuck in bridge traffic on a game day, right? And here's the uncomfortable part. Tampa has young receivers, right? I spoke about earlier. Emeka Egbuka is a first-round pick. Jalen McMillan can play. And when Evans and Godwin came back, Egbuka, his targets dropped, and coincidentally, so did the wins. So that's nothing there either. So the biggest takeaway here is simple. Love Mike Evans, and paying Mike Evans are two different things, and the right money just might make it possible or impossible. All right, next, let's pivot to the biggest takeaway is Mike Evans will have a market if he leaves Tampa. And that should be no surprise, right? Biggest takeaway here, if Mike Evans hits free agency, he is not going to be sitting around waiting for his phone to ring. He's going to have real contenders calling. Start with Buffalo, right? I think that a lot of people have drawn lines to Buffalo. And at the end of the day, the Bills make a ton of sense. Josh Allen loves big physical boundary receivers who can win jump balls. Even in shortened season, Evans was still efficient. For Buffalo, this is a classic one last run move, right? And a short-term investment to push them over the top. Evans in the red zone would be a problem for everybody. And then, this is kind of a bit of a head scratcher, but I've seen lines drawn as well as Carolina. That one is about familiarity. And what do I mean? Let's drill down. Dave Canales, of course, coached Evans during one of his most productive touchdown seasons. He knows how to scheme him open, pairing with Mike and Bryce Young and a young weapon. That could be huge. And that's a big physical receiving room and a great mentorship situation. Pittsburgh, the Steel City, is another logical landing spot, especially if they bring in veteran quarterback Aaron Rodgers. Evan fits the Steelers' culture, tough, professional, playoff tested, right? And he wins outside the numbers, without needing a ton of scheming, and that is QB friendly. The big one here is, can you imagine Mike Evans on the Chiefs with Mahomes? You can't talk elite free agents without mentioning the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes plus Mike Evans. Oh my God. In the red zone is a nightmare. Line him up with Travis Kelce, and defenses have no good answer if he wants the clearest path to snag another ring. That is it for sure. Whether Tampa keeps him or not, Mike Evans is still a difference maker. His next contract is going to shape not just his legacy, but the future of the Bucs. All right, next, let's pivot to the biggest takeaway here is the Bucs defense needs serious help, like serious. That was one of the glaring deficiencies in the latter part of the season here because the hard part of it is the Buccaneers defense roster is below average, and it shouldn't be. I think that last year will be considered a squandered year. Why did they let that happen? Because be honest with yourself, how many Bucs starters would actually start for Seattle or New England? Maybe three. Vita Vea, Antoine Winfield Jr., and Kalijah Kancey, right? When he's healthy, which hasn't been often. And that's not even championship caliber. This is about Jason Light has tried. Todd Bowles clearly has influence, but something is broken. Either in scouting or development, maybe both, because the results just aren't there. And looking back at that Super Bowl run, right? Jason Pierre-Paul, Ndamukong Suh, Shaq Barrett, all proven veterans. They didn't have to be developed. They already knew how to get to the QB. Since then, though, the Bucs, have swung on draft picks and cheaper signings. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, Logan Hall, Yaya Diaby, and even the big swing on Hassan Reddick that went nowhere in a hurry. That was much worse than I had anticipated. Now they're on their third defensive line coach in 3 years with Marcus West. That screams instability. So the case is clear. If Tampa wants to compete for another Lombardi, they need elite edge rushers, not projects, real difference makers. And that brings us back to the Mike Evans money conversation. The biggest takeaway is Tampa is at a franchise crossroads right now. Where does this franchise go? That is the screaming question that, we're still kind of living in a bit of a vacuum. That, there was questions coming out of the last Super Bowl that you knew this team was going to be a lot better, or a lot worse, that when Brady left town, that there was going to be a vacuum. And it was kind of gradual, didn't happen overnight. And the question at the QB position, right? Who was going to be the guy to replace him? And when we found out it was going to be Baker Mayfield, it was met with skepticism. And what we saw was pretty good, but it's not good enough, right? And I think that, one of the things that the Bucs have going for them, and that's, to kind of take the loser answer, is they play in a truly horrible NFC South, where a team that, can be below 500 wins the NFC South. It's kind of messed up. But the questions and, Jason Light, I think that to a certain extent has lost some of his effectiveness, that his decision-making is questioned or should be questioned more than it was years ago. He can always hang his hat on. He got Brady to come into town. He got, Gronkowski and all of those kind of players to do the unthinkable thing, to win another Super Bowl in Tampa. But it is a crossroads now, as we are, quite a bit removed from those glory days, I guess is what I'm going to say. So final segment, and the biggest takeaway that ties everything together. The Buccaneers are standing at one of the most important crossroads in franchise history. On one path, you re-sign Mike Evans. You keep your legend. You keep the chemistry with Baker. You keep that red zone threat, right? And you try to win now with your offensive core. Now, on the other path, you let Evans walk. You free up cap space and pour that money into a defense that desperately needs. You bet on Egbuka, Godwin, McMillan, and a more rhythm-based run after catch offense. And Baker Mayfield showed in previous years that he can distribute the football and thrive in, like Liam Combs' system right before. You remember him before? And he doesn't need to lock into one guy to be effective. That matters a lot, that there is a history of working with different coaches and coordinators, these kind of things. But you also can't ignore what Evans brings: leadership, culture, big moments, contested catches, January football. That's not a replaceable on a spreadsheet. So here's to make the case. This isn't about Mike Evans, the player. It's about Mike Evans, the symbol, and what kind of team Tampa wants to be going forward. And there's Viking fans that live near where I do, and they talk about Jefferson, right? And I talk about, I'm like, if I was the GM, I would trade Jefferson, because unless Jefferson can be the quarterback and the receiver and the running back and play on the line, it's not enough. That kind of is in the same category as Mike Evans. If they could move him now, trade him now, and maximize the return, doesn't that make sense in a lot of ways? And I know that's kind of sacrilege and smack that name right out of my mouth, but it's kind of true that I think that you could get a decent haul, and his value, is going to diminish over time as he gets older. And as the stats maybe take a dip and the injuries pile up, all of those things, right? That it's one of those tough love things. And I think one of the most important things as a sports fan is to not have too many allegiances or warm fuzzies, if you will, to certain players. I want the best quarterback. I want the best running back, the best wide receiver, the best lineman out on the field that are going to give the Buccaneers the best chance of winning games on a game in, game out basis. And, you take a look, a lot of money tied up in Evans, a lot of money tied up in Godwin. Is that a misappropriation of money at one position, right? I think that oftentimes you see that at the quarterback, but that's kind of an apples and oranges scenario. The quarterback is the distributor, right? He is the guy. He is the glue that holds the whole damn thing together. But I think the Bucs are in a better position now that they have Egbuka, they have Jalen, right? They have, these kind of other options. It's not the Bucs of yesteryear, where it was all the offense, if it was a wide receiver, was going through Evans or Godwin. And, we've seen different guys, complementary pieces, around them as well. But I think it's time as Bucs fans to kind of lift our heads up a little bit and look past the present and into the horizon and the future, because change is coming, right? Players get older. And at some point, you don't want, Mike Evans, who, like I said, the injuries are starting to mount up. They're starting to rack up, that you don't want him to be the guy that's holding this team back. And he's not quite there yet, but he is on the back nine of his career. I mean, make no mistake about it, that why not make it mutually beneficial? Why not get a good return? And why not give Mike Evans one last chance to win a Super Bowl somewhere? If it's the Bills, if it's the Chiefs, if it's a team like that, then why not? I think that is how we have to kind of start positioning ourselves, because again, we can't hold these guys in time capsules forever. It will not be this moment right now forever. It just will not be. So that's the hard part, is just getting past the memories of Mike Evans and everything that he's meant to this community and all that, and his many accomplishments on the field, right? That we need to start thinking about the Buccaneers in the future. And when I say the future, I mean next season. I'm not talking, 3, 4, 5 years from now. We need to start making that change. So, we don't have situations where we, miss out on winning the NFC South to a subpar team. And let's be honest here. The Carolina Panthers are a subpar team. The Buccaneers, I believe, are the better team. They just lost their way, right, throughout the season. That is what we need to focus on, to bring competitive football back to Tampa. And I mean, I'm not saying the Bucs weren't competitive last year, but we need to see more. So to close it out here, this is just about Mike Evans, the player. It's not about Mike Evans, the symbol. Do you honor the past and pay the legend, or do you build the future by fixing a defense that isn't good enough? That's the question facing Todd Bowles, Jason Light, and every single Bucs fan listening right now. And however they answer it will shape the franchise for years to come. All right, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network. Again, the best way to help grow this show is to subscribe to the Bucs Report on YouTube. Like the videos and feed the algorithm by commenting anything down below. My name is Dan Holme of the Bucs Report, and I'll talk to you again next time.